The Battle of Honey Springs. To understand Honey Springs, we must rewind to the 1830s, when the U.S. government forcibly relocated the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole, to Indian Territory. This land, rich in rivers, forests, and fertile valleys, became a patchwork of tribal nations, plantations, and trading posts. The terrain was rugged and varied: rolling hills, dense oak and hickory forests, and broad valleys carved by the Canadian and Arkansas rivers. Honey Springs itself was named for the sweet water bubbling from natural springs in the area, a vital rest stop along the Texas Road, the Confederacy's supply artery from Texas to Fort Gibson. Indian Territory was a buffer zone, Free State Kansas to the north, Slave State Texas to the south, and whoever controlled the Texas Road controlled the region's fate. Enter General Douglas H. Cooper, a former Indian agent turned Confederate commander. Born in Mississippi, Cooper had a checkered past: failed planter, middling businessman, but a man with deep ties to the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations. He was respected by many native leaders, but his military instincts were cautious at best. With 6,000 troops, including Indian volunteers and the 29th Texas Regiment, Cooper planned to hold Honey Springs until General William L. Cabell arrived with reinforcements from Fort Smith, Arkansas. Cabell, a Virginian with a flair for drama and a history of failed ventures, including a disastrous stint as a railroad executive, was bold but often late. Cooper's plan was textbook: hold the road, wait for Cabell, then retake Fort Gibson. But the Union had other ideas. James Gilpatrick Blunt was not born into military greatness. He was a New Englander by birth, raised in Maine, who tried his hand at medicine and business before the war. His ventures outside the Army were often failures. His medical practice faltered, and his business dealings collapsed. But Blunt was a man of restless energy, boldness, and conviction. When the Civil War broke out, he reinvented himself as a soldier. He rose quickly in the Union ranks, commanding in Kansas and Indian Territory. His character was fiery, sometimes reckless, but he had a gift for inspiring men. His weakness was his temper and occasional rashness, but his strength was his aggressiveness. He believed in striking first, even when outnumbered. By July 1863, Blunt commanded about 3,000 men. He knew Confederate General Douglas H. Cooper had twice his numbers and was waiting for reinforcements under General William L. Cabell. If Cooper and Cabell united, Fort Gibson would fall, and Blunt's army would be crushed. So Blunt made the daring decision: attack Cooper before Cabell arrived. Cooper believed the swollen Arkansas River, heavy with summer rains, would protect him. The river was deep, muddy, and treacherous to ford. Cooper gambled that Blunt's army would not risk crossing it, but Blunt's men did. They marched through rain and mud, boots soaked, uniforms heavy, but spirits high. Scouts reported to Cooper, "General Cooper, sir, the Yanks have crossed over. They've broken our pickets and pushed back our cavalry." Cooper barked orders: "Assume a defensive and make ready our mountain howitzers. I want to drive them back before the day sets." Cooper set his defenses near the Musco Creek community of Honey Springs. His lines were a mosaic of tribal and Texan forces. Left flank, 1st and 2nd Creek Volunteers. Right flank, 1st and 2nd Cherokee Volunteers. Center, 20th, 29th, and 5th Texas Regiments. It was a diverse army, but divided in loyalty and spirit. Blunt's army was smaller, but carried momentum from Union victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg earlier that month. His force included 12 artillery pieces, Indian Home Guards, Creek, Cherokee, Seminole, and others, refugees fighting to reclaim their homes. 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry, the first African-American regiment to fight for the Union, composed largely of formerly enslaved men from Missouri and Arkansas who had fled to Kansas. These men embodied courage. To run away from slavery was already a gamble with death. To return armed, fighting for freedom, was defiance incarnate. Colonel James Monroe Williams, commander of the 1st Kansas Colored Regiment, was a man of conviction. Born in Kentucky, he had tried farming and business before the war, but found his calling in the Union Army. He believed deeply in his soldiers, many of whom had escaped bondage. On the morning of July 17th, Williams gave a fiery speech. "We are engaged in a holy war, for a holier cause, for the preservation of the Union and the equal rights and freedom of all men. The Southern armies fight for continued existence and extension of slavery. and if successful, to take you and your wives and children back into that slavery. Show the enemy this day that you are vigorous, that you are eager to fight for your freedom. The people of the whole country will read the reports of your conduct in this engagement. Let it be that of brave, disciplined men." His men roared back, "Huzzah! Huzzah! Huzzah!" By mid-1863, the Union had triumphed at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, and the war's momentum was shifting. But in Indian Territory, the stakes were different. Every commander knew that whatever happened at Honey Springs would be reported back to Washington, dissected by politicians and leaked to the press. And in a nation where racism was rampant, the performance of black soldiers would be scrutinized more than any other. The 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry Regiment carried not just rifles, but the burden of proving to the country that African Americans were willing and able to fight for freedom. Their courage would be judged in headlines, in speeches, and in the hearts of skeptics. Among the Confederate ranks stood Chili McIntosh, commander of the Muskogee Creek Regiment. Born into the prominent McIntosh family, he was the son of William McIntosh, a Creek chief executed decades earlier for signing away tribal lands. Chili grew up in the shadow of that legacy, torn between tradition and survival. He tried his hand at farming and business, but like many in Indian Territory, his ventures faltered. His strength lay in leadership, in the warrior tradition of his people. His weakness was loyalty divided, to the Confederacy, to his tribe, and to his own fractured family history. On that day at Honey Springs, McIntosh rallied his men with words that echoed like Homeric poetry. "When you first saw the light, it was said of you, a man-child is born. You must prove today whether or not this saying of you was true. Man must die sometime. And since he must die, he could find no nobler death than that which overtakes him while fighting for his home, his fires, and his country." His warriors cheered, knowing they would be remembered in songs and stories, immortal around the campfires of their people. As McIntosh's men braced themselves, the battlefield erupted. Skirmishers exchanged fire, and then came the thunder, an artillery duel that lasted nearly 2 hours. The Confederates had 4 guns, the Union had 12. Blunt's artillery, including 12-pounders accurate at nearly a mile, pounded the Confederate lines. Smoke filled the air, obscuring friend from foe. Blunt ordered, "On my command, fire." The ground shook. Clouds of smoke rolled across the field. Through the haze, the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry advanced. Former slaves from Missouri and Arkansas, men who had risked everything to escape bondage, now marched with muskets and bayonets. They knew capture meant death. They knew skeptics doubted them. But they pressed forward. One soldier declared, "Mr. Lincoln gave me my freedom, and now I'm here to fight for it. Let me get an eagle on my button, a musket on my shoulder, and bullets in my pocket. We will stand our ground, for I know what can be given today can be taken tomorrow." Colonel James M. Williams, their commander, believed in them. He placed them in the center of the line, the most dangerous position, but also the most decisive. If they broke through, the Confederate defense would collapse, and they did not falter. Volley after volley, they held their ground, disciplined and determined. Across the field, a Texan soldier spoke with equal conviction. "Them Jayhawkers can call me Reb, Johnny, or Grayback. They'd be wrong. I'm truly a son of Texas. My father fought the Mexican powers for our independence. Now I fight the invading powers from the north. This ain't a war of rebellion. Not to me. It's a matter of self-determination." For him, the war was about liberty, though tragically defined in defense of slavery. The 2nd Indian Home Guard, fighting for the Union, accidentally advanced too far and found themselves caught between lines. Their commander, Bowles, ordered them to fall back through bugle calls and signal flags. The Texans saw the movement and mistook it for retreat. Seizing the opportunity, they launched an attack. As the Confederate 29th Texas and elements of the 20th Texas pressed forward, the 1st Kansas held firm. The Texans charged, shouting, "Press them, boys." The Kansans answered with discipline. Volley after volley, musket fire cracking like thunder. 3 Confederate color-bearers fell in succession, their flags shot down. That moment shattered the Confederate center. The tide of battle shifted. Colonel James M. Williams, commanding the 1st Kansas, had told his men earlier, "Show the enemy this day that you are vigorous, eager to fight for your freedom. The people of the whole country will read the reports of your conduct. And indeed, their valor was undeniable. Confederate reports later revealed a bitter truth. Their gunpowder, imported from Mexico, was damp and unreliable. Muskets misfired, cannons sputtered. The South's lack of industrial capacity, compared to the North, was laid bare in the smoke of Honey Springs. Brigadier General Douglas H. Cooper faced a grim choice. His lines were faltering, his ammunition failing, and reinforcements under Cabell were nowhere in sight. He ordered, "Defend the bridge. Once the cannons have come through, fall back. Set fire to the depot. Nothing must fall into their hands." The tragedy of Honey Springs was not only Confederate versus Union, but Creek versus Creek, Cherokee versus Cherokee. Some native soldiers fought for the Confederacy, believing men like Cooper were allies. Others, following leaders like Opothleyahula, sided with the Union, remembering how the South had driven them from their homelands. One Creek fighter lamented, "I can see the remains of my tribe, faces of my brothers fighting against me. My tribe is now in slivers. Each promised their own independence by warring white men whose oaths have no honor. But I remember Opothleyahula, and for his memory I fight." The 1st Indian Home Guard Regiment, composed of Creek refugees forced into Kansas, now fought in their own homeland against their own kin. It was civil war within a civil war. The Confederates defended the bridge with ferocity, slowing the Union advance long enough for Cooper to withdraw his wagons and artillery. What supplies could not be saved were burned. Depots and stores went up in flames as Choctaw and Chickasaw soldiers retreated down the Texas road. Cabell's reinforcements finally arrived, too late to counterattack. The Confederates were in full retreat, their morale broken. Cooper later wrote, "Our forces were now in full retreat, and the enemy pressing them closely. The men behaved admirably. I feel confident we could have made good the defense of Elk Creek, but for the worthlessness of our ammunition." The Union victory at Honey Springs effectively ended Confederate control of Indian Territory. But the aftermath was bitter. After the war, the U.S. government looked back at native alliances with the Confederacy and used them as justification to nullify treaties. Even tribes that had largely fought for the Union, like the Cherokee after 1862, were punished. By the 1870s, Reconstruction treaties stripped native nations of land and autonomy. The Choctaw and Chickasaw, who had sheltered 18,000 refugees, were still blamed. The war became the excuse for opening Indian Territory to white settlement. And so, dear viewer, Honey Springs was not just a battle. It was a crucible where black soldiers proved their valor, native nations fought divided, and the Confederacy lost its grip on Oklahoma. It was a day of musket fire, smoke, betrayal, and courage, a day that echoed far beyond the Texas road, reshaping the destiny of Indian Territory.